Are we coming through? Cole, could you go and check on YouTube to see if we're live?
Yeah, sure.
Just Zak Z is my channel, so just check there.
What is it?
Zak Z. The live stream should be right up there.
Okay. I'll check right now.
Okay. I'll check as well. I might be able to check myself. Hopefully it's not screen recording. It might be. Okay, if we're live right now, the debate will start a few minutes probably, once we have everything ironed out. Okay, it looks like we are live. Alright, I'm trying to click it, but...
Sounds good.
I'm the only person.
I think we have a viewer.
We have one viewer, yes. What's so funny?
Nothing, it's
mute myself. All right, now that I'm live, so everyone else can hear you right now, guys.
Okay, yeah, I just checked. We're live. We're live.
Yep.
Is there any way to pull up the chat and not the video, because I don't want the echo? I've never been live before.
Oops. Well, just like it's in your dashboard. Just mute the video.
Oh right, okay.
Like you should be looking at it right now through
yeah, I see it.
Live dashboard.
Yeah, I just okay, I did it. All right. Everything's good on your end, Lane? Or sorry, PG.
Yeah, you're an idiot.
Yeah, I am. Oh, Lucas has joined the chat. Great.
Dang, you got more watchers than me.
That's mostly because I heavily advertise this on my social media, so I'm gonna get a lot of my friends and acquaintances watching this. All right, so. Oh, all right, so.
Oh my God, we got Paul in here.
Yep.
All right, well, so since we got all that down, you want to go ahead and kick off this debate?
Yeah, it's good on your end?
Yep.
All right, Cole, you ready?
I'm all set.
All right, let's go. Let's start it off. Socialism. All right. Oh, and we agreed before that, Lane, you can give the first dialogue to start the first question. So Lane goes first, and I'll just go off of that.
You're an idiot.
How am I an idiot? That's what we agreed
call
to.
me PG.
Okay, guys.
I'm sorry. I'm so used to calling you Lane. All right, PG. What, do you not want people to know your first name? What's the problem with that?
It's not my first name. Whatever. Just I don't care if you call me.
Okay, whatever. I'll call you PG. My apologies. All right. All right, Cole, kick off the first question.
Okay. Hey there, viewers. We're gonna start off with socialism.
Yes.
We'll start off with PG. PG will answer first. Give us your thoughts.
All right, I'm gonna kick Lucas from the chat real quick.
Whoa, he's about to finish it.
Wait. Oh, crap, I can't. Alright, remove.
Oh, there we go. I just got finished.
Oh, come on. Wait,
Alright, so,
okay, yeah, go
so
first
we're talking
while I
about
deal with
socialism
Lucas.
right now, right?
Okay, go ahead.
God, this is a horrible debate already. I'm sorry. I'm looking at your chat. It's just fucking hilarious.
I know. Just make a response.
All right. Well, what was that? Was there a question I was being asked, or what was that? You just said socialism, and then.
What do you?
Okay.
Go ahead.
Give us what do you think the problems with socialism are, and how do they affect the modern day economy?
Everything. Honestly, like I'm hearing an echo from Zach's end, honestly, so that's something distracted.
Well, the video's on mute, so it shouldn't. That's not the reason why.
Yeah, no. Anyway, so socialism honestly is a failure of a system. So is communism. And I mean, I know like people always say, well, I mean, socialism and communism are pretty different. Honestly, they're not. They're still more of a government-based system. And I believe that both of them as a whole are a failure. And every single time they've been tried, they always end up failing because inherent government dependency is a bad thing, in my own opinion. And I believe that socialism, I mean, you go over to like Scandinavia and stuff like that, and they always say like, well, we're democratic socialists. They're actually not socialists at all. Well, I mean,
social democrats.
Social democrats or anything. I mean, they call themselves that, but I mean, they still have an inherently I keep on saying inherently. That's hilarious. It's more of a capitalist system because I mean that's how they actually survive. The only things that are under government control is healthcare, schooling. I think the prison system, but like I mean, it's just completely different from like the American prison system because both of those are actually under government control, and it's more of just some sort of system that I mean in the past I mean we looked at socialism, we always said, okay, well I mean the Soviets are trying it right now, look what they're doing, and I mean people such as Ronald Reagan like literally made the best jokes about it. I mean, you can look that up, but it's it's more of like just. And now that we're looking at socialism now, especially from a viewpoint of a millennial or just a kid who's about to go into the workforce for the first time, we're looking at it and saying, okay, well. Socialism seems to be pretty cool because we get free healthcare, free schooling, free this, free that. Like, there's no, and especially as a completely different society, we can't transition from American capitalism to American socialism because American socialism just would not work, especially since. Like these countries in Europe can afford it because I mean their populations are completely smaller than that. Germany has about 80 million people. Norway, Sweden, they have about less than 20 million people in both of those countries, and they are pretty well off because I mean they don't have to take care of 325 million people in one country, 330 million people depending on how 2020 census goes out. And like it's just a system, especially in the United States, that's not going to work with free healthcare. I mean, healthcare, we're already looking at costs from Bernie Sanders' plan that would skyrocket the cost of healthcare from like the trillion we're paying for now to about 30 trillion in the next 10 years if that plan was actually implemented. But obviously that plan is going to fail. Because
obviously
it's an extremely expensive plan. It's not going to work, especially as the United States, because it is so expensive. And you can try to say, well, I mean, it's going to reduce healthcare costs. Well, that's because that was actually a very.
Okay, wait. Am I?
Sure, I'll go ahead and end my point right now. It's people always say, well, I mean, it's going to save people money. Yeah, it could save people money because they're not paying for it anymore. It's because the government's going to be paying for that. But there's also other things that you're going to be paying for, which is going to be higher taxes. And then the U.S. federal deficit is going to explode because we're trying to take care of everyone's healthcare plan. And that's just going to make it even worse. And once people start seeing, okay, the government's paying for our stuff, then, just start breaking your arm, breaking your leg, go to the hospital, don't worry about it. But the government has to worry about it because they're the ones who are going to start dealing with that debt. And then we're going to be the ones who are going to be paying for that debt because they're going to start reducing healthcare costs. They're going to start reducing infrastructure spending. Our infrastructure is going to get even worse than it is right now. And
okay,
yeah.
All right. Okay, that's it. You're done.
Yep.
Now, Zach, your response.
All right. So your characterization of socialism is basically the same that everyone on the right does, which is that socialism equals communism when this can't be further from the truth. Socialism is a umbrella term, meaning that it encompasses many different ideologies underneath it, including democratic socialism, social democracy,
and communism.
And communism. And not only that, you portray socialism as though it's a polar force to capitalism when this can't be further from the truth. FDR showed that to us during his New Deal era, in which socialist programs and progressive programs were implemented.
You're about to get me started on something, boy. Gotta bring up my boy FDR.
I did not interrupt you during your 10-minute dialogue, so don't interrupt me. Anyways, what I personally advocate for is social democracy. And if you ask me, social democracy and progressivism are one and the same. They advocate for the same principles. And you were saying that socialism and capitalism cannot go together. Well, they're, for the most part, meant to go together. One main tenet of social democracy, which Bernie Sanders advocates, which Bernie Sanders has not been advocating for, and same with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the two leading figures of the progressive movement have not been advocating for what is Keynesian economics, and that's the main tenet that I think should be advocated for more. And Keynesian economics boils down to the fact that if you have a big gap in wealth inequality between the richest and the poorest...
economics or Keynesian?
Keynesian. Keynesian.
I know. I just thought you said community.
No. Keynesian economics advocates for a system where if you close the gap between the poorest and the wealthy, because closing the gap isn't a moral argument, at least it shouldn't be a moral argument, it's an economic argument, because if you have a big gap between the poorest and the richest, then there's not any economic, there's not a robust economy, because that money isn't flowing, that's money that's not going towards cars, food, appliances, because when you have money towards the top that's not being spent on those things, you're not going to have a robust economy. And Keynesian economics advocates for heavy taxes on the wealth in order to benefit the middle class, so that they can give that so that money can flow freely in the economy. That's what Keynesian economics advocates for. And Keynesian economics was the principle that was used by FDR during the New Deal era in order to reinvigorate the American economy, and by Barack Obama, not as much, but it was slightly implemented following the 2008 housing crisis to bring the United States out of the recession. These are economic principles that have not been spoken about by Bernie Sanders, and I think that's a big mistake, because it's a reasonable ideology, and it's one that I think that many people could find reasonable. And I think that for the most part, Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez have been calling themselves democratic socialists in order to create publicity, and I think that's mostly a mistake, because they're not democratic socialists, they're social democrats, which there is a difference between. And what you're saying is that socialism and communism are essentially the same thing, when that cannot be further from the truth. Because when you're looking at it from a world scale, China's government, which is by nature called communist, although it's not technically the truth. And then when you look at Canada's government, they have socialist institutions. But Canada and China's government, you cannot equate, not in the slightest. So socialism, since its creation as a term, has been whittled down to just being a very general ideological term that can almost mean anything. So you have to be specific when you talk about certain socialist quote-unquote principles. And what I advocate for in particular is progressivism, which is the nature of taxes on the wealth in order to benefit the middle class, in order to create a robust economy. And that has been proven time and time again, especially by FDR. I think that FDR perfectly captures the progressive movement, and I think that that's something that many people... So I'm just checking the time, that many people lose sight of, and that they're looking to countries like Sweden and Denmark, when in reality they should be looking towards FDR and the programs they instituted right here in the United States. And that's not something that people are saying, and particularly Bernie Sanders has not been setting, which I think is a big mistake. But capitalism and socialism are meant to go hand in hand. They're meant to go hand in hand, and people are saying that they're polar opposites because, and for the most part, it's fear-mongering, because people still remember the Cold War, and they equate socialism and communism to be the same exact thing, when that cannot be further from the truth. In fact, democratic socialists and social democrats protested against the communist system that the USSR had. So that's my dialogue when it comes to socialism, and you can go on and go ahead. I'm done speaking.
Okay, so you brought up a couple of things about like Franklin Delano Roosevelt and stuff like that, and by the way, I can hear the echo again.
So
FDR honestly made the economy way worse than it needed to be during the Great Depression.
Way worse?
Yeah.
The American economy was booming like it has never seen before at that point. The only time it's been replaced was under Bill Clinton, who also instituted taxes on the rich. So I don't know what you're saying when you're trying to make the point. Okay, just go on. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
So I'm looking at annual change in real GDP since 1930. So
can we not pull up statistics? This is all supposed to be just off the top of our head. You can use the statistic you're looking at right now, but just in general, don't.
So, oh wait, that's UK GDP. Okay, so in 1930, we were getting like severely low economic growth. Here, I'm gonna mute you for a second because I can hear my voice. So in 1930, we were getting a lot of negative GDP growth. That was like spanning from about like 8% to about 6%, then all the way to about 13%. And then in 1935 or 1934, the economy got a little better because, the New Deal policies were actually starting to get instated.
Yes.
Then in 1935, it started to get really better. We started seeing like 10% GDP growth and 9%. Then like 15, or not 15, that's like 13. But around like all the way into 1940, that's whenever the economy started getting worse again because of these policies where we were starting to pay for more and more people.
That's not necessarily true, but go on.
It's not. I'm not saying that the policies that he instated were bad. They were
there was no major economic decline in 1940.
But at the same
I think you're nitpicking for the most part.
They did make the economy worse, and we never exactly
in the long run, absolutely not.
During that entire time that I just didn't mean to do, by the way. The United States never actually recovered in the time from 1929 to 1939. The only recovery we started to see in full was in 1940.
Okay, again, I think you're nitpicking for the most part because...
No, I'm not nitpicking.
You are, because it's not like there was a major economic decline in 1940. The economy kept growing at a steady pace, and after World War II, that just became even more rapid, and after World War II, we became a superpower. And that was, for the most part, FDR's progressive principles that were instituted into the government that helped us propel.
But if we never got involved in the war, the Depression would have spanned all the way in the 1950s.
That is not true. That is not true. The Depression and the war are two independent things. We got involved in the war in the first place because we were able to get out of the Depression using FDR's progressive principles.
No, we got involved in the war because Japan attacked us at Pearl Harbor.
Okay, but you're looking at specifics, and I'm looking at generality. Like, we would never have been able to get involved in the war, and at least not to the scale we were. I mean, I agree with you that we were prompted to enter the war as a result of Japan's attacks on us, but we would not have been able to enter the war as a major military force if it was not for the economic state that we were in at that point. I think that's a pretty plausible... wouldn't you say that that's pretty plausible?
No, because honestly,
you think that we would have entered the war? You think that we would have entered the war
in an economic depression doesn't mean that we can't.
Okay, we would not have entered World War II if we were in a dismal economic state.
Most of the weapons for the Allies, and that's what started to cause economic growth in the first place. Is because we were giving all these weapons to the British, the French.
Yes, but we would not have been at that point if it was not for the economic state that we were there to begin with.
Wait, what?
Okay, we would not have been able to get to that point in the war. We would not have. Okay, we're kind of veering off topic here, but I'll finish my point. We would not have been able to get to that point militarily, at least not at the point of World War II, if it was not for the progressive programs that FDR instituted.
Like what?
So, Social Security, Medicare, just the general government interventions that FDR and his government took in order to get the United States back on track.
So do you believe that Social Security has an inherent connection to military spending?
Okay, now you're grandstanding. That's not what I meant at all. I'm saying that the general economic state that the United States was in at the time of World War II was what prompted us to enter the war at the full force that we did. We would not have been able to, economically speaking, we would not have been able to enter the war at the full force if we did not have the capital. I don't know how that's something that you can disagree with, because that's just... We would not have been able to enter the war as a poor country. I think it's a better way to phrase it. We would not have been able to enter the war if we were a poor nation.
Okay, guys, we're gonna have to move on.
Yeah,
we barely even covered it. We were just talking about World War II.
I just want to ask him this one more question. Like, you're talking about capital and the money that we're spending and stuff like that. How can you say that whenever all of our money was literally going in Social Security and healthcare and stuff like that? And then we also, I would have to look up the numbers on like the economic spending of Social Security and healthcare in the 1930s and 40s all the way into the 50s. But do you deny that World War II like helped us recover even faster?
I agreed with you. I said that was the case. That World War II and our mass output of weapons to the Allies is a big major factor as to why we became a superpower.
Do you also, not also, but do you deny that the Depression would have gone on any longer if we had not gotten involved in the war?
The Depression ended before World War II.
No, it didn't.
Yes, it did.
It didn't. The Depression didn't officially stop until about 1940.
This is factual data that you can look up. The Depression ended before World War II. For countries that were heavily affected, like the United States, like Germany, like Britain, like Japan, the Depression ended before World War II. The United States, I'm not speaking to other countries, but the United States was able to get out of the Depression primarily because of the progressive principles and ideologies that FDR instituted into our government, which remain a part of our government today.
Okay, so unemployment. I'm gonna make this point, and then we can go on to the next one. Which is
well, if you make a point, go on.
Yeah, I know. Okay, so unemployment whenever the Depression started was just under 5%. Then it exploded to about 21 in 1933, and then it kind of started to slow down 18% in about 1937, it looks like, and then 1939 it was 18%.
Okay, the Depression ended in 1939.
The Depression?
Yes.
Yes, because of the war. The war started in 1939.
Okay, the Depression period did not end because of the war. The Depression was an event that took place in numerous countries across the world. So you can't say that the war ended the Depression for each and every single country, and I don't think you can say that for the United States.
Not every single country. I'm saying for the United States. Like, I mean, even I actually meant to say this earlier.
This is becoming this is becoming a debate.
Nazi Germany. Nazi Germany.
PG.
Recovered.
This is becoming an argument over. This is becoming an argument over World War II, and this is not what was the original intent.
Okay, we should move on to legal immigration.
Yeah, I'm kind of not happy that we were talking about the war for half that discussion, but yeah, go on, I guess.
Because it's a pivotal thing. That's why we're talking about the war.
Well, socialism as a topic does not just have to do with
World
War II.
Let's go. Boy, guys. Okay, so first question is to PG. Are illegal immigrants a net gain to the U.S. economy?
Yes and no.
Explain.
Mostly, I mean, it's a mixed bag, honestly. Like, I mean, I kind of take something that one of my friends says. Like, I think getting immigrants for specific specialties, you know, getting them in and then like saying, okay, well, I mean, like if you're good at this job, then we can use you for that. Good at this job, use you for that. Blah blah blah. But I think. Wait, did you say immigrants or illegal immigrants?
The topic is illegal immigration.
Yeah, illegal immigrants.
So are they a net gain?
Yes, a net gain to the
Oh,
U.S.
God,
economy.
no. I thought you were talking about immigration in general. No, they're not.
Is that all?
Like, illegal immigrants are a net loss for the United States because, actually, for any country, like, where they're entering illegally, because, for one, it completely screws up the census. We don't know how many people are inside of our country unless we're actually, like, counting them in the census.
Does that affect the economy, though?
Which is a completely different bag of discussion. But coming into the country illegally is a loss because it's more money we're having to spend on you, because once we detain you, we have to take care of you for like this amount of time before we can finally send you back. Because we're taking care of like illegal immigrants, like at the detention centers at the border, or all over the country, because they're not just at the border actually. Like, we're taking care of those people and saying, okay, well, like, we need to make sure we know who you are, blah, blah, blah. Then we're going to send you back. Like, it's just more money that we're having to spend on them, which we spend a lot of money on illegal immigrants already. We're spending over $100 billion on illegal immigrants right now.
That's stretched out over a very long period of time. $100 billion stretched out over a year or 2 years is not that much money in the grand scheme of the United States government spending.
$100 billion is not a lot of money.
And in terms of over a year, when you're putting in the context of the United States government spending, it's a portion, but it's not a it's not a lot. But go on, go ahead.
$100 billion is $100 billion, no matter how much.
Stretched out over a period of a year, when you're thinking in terms of government spending, that's. Do you understand?
So what about $600 billion? That's how much we're spending on the U.S. military.
Yeah, I agree. I think we should decrease military spending. Is that your point?
No, I'm saying, like, in an annual sense, it's not a lot of money, just like you said.
Yeah, but $600 billion is a hell of a lot more than $100 billion, which is why I think we should decrease military spending.
So why not decrease spending on illegal immigrants when we're spending over $150 billion on them?
I'll get to that once you're done with your statement. Go on. Are you done?
So, no. Well,
okay, go ahead. Go ahead. I don't need to rush you. Go ahead.
No, I'm not. Technically, we can have this thing go on for more than an hour, so we don't have to rush ourselves.
Yeah, I agree.
I can already tell this is going to go on.
Yeah, this is half an hour, and I kind of want to go back to socialism as well, because I think we kind of wasted that topic. Cole, do you have the time to spend over an hour on this?
If not, then we can get another moderator in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I agree. Time limit is lifted. Let's just go forward with however much time we need on this topic. Yeah. All right. Are you?
So, I think I was just about done. I thought I was going to say something else, but I didn't. So,
your point there was that we're spending $100 billion or $150 billion, depending on which year you're looking at or which time span you're looking at, on bringing illegal immigrants in. Not only is that stretched out over long periods of time to the point where you're just spending $8 billion or $7 billion a month or less, because it fluctuates depending on the rate at which illegal immigrants are coming in. One thing that Republicans and the right in general tends to leave out when they're talking about illegal immigration is that illegal immigration is down. There's been a visible decline in illegal immigration since Obama took office. Obama deported more illegal immigrants than any other president. They don't call him the deporter-in-chief for nothing. They called him the deporter-in-chief while he was in office because he deported...
Because they didn't want to make him look like a bad guy.
Well, how does a deporter-in-chief make you look like a good guy? Whatever, that's beside the point. He deported millions...
I would go on into a discussion about, like the differences between how, like, Obama was treated and how Donald Trump is treated,
That's entirely separate. I don't want to divert into a different discussion like we did with socialism. Let's not do that again. But, was that Cole or PG?
No, that was me.
All right. So, a study by the Cato Institute, which is a libertarian think tank, and I'm not looking this up, this is just off the top of my head. A study by the Cato Institute taken in Texas, your home state, showed that illegal immigration and instituting illegal immigrants as citizens into the United States has a positive effect on the economy. And not only that, the rate of crime amongst illegal immigrants, because this is something that's brought up by the right pretty frequently, that illegal immigrants commit more crime than citizens, which is especially brought up after the whole Molly Tibbetts murder. It's a false statistic. Illegal immigrants do not commit more crime than citizens when you're looking at it per capita. Not only that, there is a net gain when it comes to the economy and bringing illegal immigrants into, or giving illegal immigrants citizenship for those who deserve it. When you're...
Are you arguing for giving them citizenship, or are you arguing...
I'm saying that giving illegal immigrants citizenship has a net gain on the economy. Statistics have shown that. The Cato Institute, which did a study in Texas, has shown that. And you were saying that the spending that we're using to bring illegal immigrants in the end has a net decline in the economy, which is false. The spending that we're using to reinstitute illegal immigrants into the United States is not any significant figure. And especially at this rate of illegal immigrants, I think that once illegal immigration... I think that if illegal immigration was heightened overall, it would be a problem. I think that we would see different statistics then. But at the rate we're seeing now, when it comes to illegal immigration every month, we're seeing positive effects on the economy. We're seeing a positive effects on the economy because not only is it not the net spending that you're doing on instituting illegal immigrants into the United States does not surpass the economic benefits that they give to companies and to small businesses because they provide cheap labor. And I think that for the most part that is a problem. I think it's something we need to address. But if we're looking at it based on raw numbers, they have a positive effect on the economy, and studies have shown that.
And honestly, I would actually have to disagree with that because I'm actually looking at a statistic
Disagree
right
with
now.
the facts, or from who? Also, I said that we shouldn't...
The Federation for American Immigration and Reform. So,
what is that looking at per capita? Is that looking at per capita?
Expenditure. Huh?
Is that looking at it per capita?
No, this is total.
Yes, exactly. You can't look at it total because illegal immigrants.
Total is total is just a fact. I mean,
total is the fact. But if we're not looking at it per capita, then it's not a relevant statistic. Because illegal immigrants obviously have a very small portion of the United States population when you're comparing them to actual citizens.
11 million is still a pretty significant number.
Compared to the 360 million legal citizens in the United States, it's a pretty small portion.
325.
All right.
I'm only correcting.
Yes, you're only correcting.
So, okay, so this is total. This is going to be my point. Federal cost of the... Oh my god, I can hear myself. I hate my voice. Okay, so federal cost of illegal immigrants is 45.8 billion.
So not 100
by the
billion.
federal government. Huh?
So not 100 billion, as you said before. It's 48 billion.
No, I'm getting on to that.
Okay.
45.8 billion by the federal government.
Yes.
State and local cost goes up to 88.9 billion. So total national cost is $134.8 billion.
And that's cost going towards what?
Then we go into the total tax contributions by illegal immigrants.
That's money going towards what?
So,
because I said that I don't want to bring up statistics, but I did bring up a statistic of my own. I didn't look it up, but it's just off the top of my head.
Statistics help out a lot, actually.
I know, but this is a debate. This is supposed to be information off the top of our heads. If we're going by statistics, then it's just going to be us analyzing piece by piece, statistic by statistic, and that's kind of... Whatever, just go on, because I did bring up my own statistic. I didn't look it up. That's just something I brought off the top of my head, but you have the right to bring up your own since
I already knew about that. I mean, whenever I brought this up earlier, that was off the top of my head. I was just I looked it up to the government.
That's fine.
So then we go on to total tax contributions by illegal immigrants. Federal taxes being paid by illegal immigrants is $15.4 billion. State and local taxes go to $3.5 billion. So the total taxes paid is $18.9 billion. So they're not even making up the amount of money that they're actually taking by the government. So that's a total $116 billion deficit that they actually have.
But what are you looking at in terms? I don't understand the context of this statistic you're reading.
The context?
Yes.
So what kind of context are you wanting?
What that money is being spent towards specifically? Is that being spent towards bringing illegal immigrants in and reinstituting them, or is that being spent towards
federal spending? Is going toward federal education, federal medical costs, justice expenditures like deportation hearings and stuff like that, asylum hearings. That's also going into welfare and.
Okay, well, I'm talking in terms of giving illegal immigrants citizenship. I'm not talking about in terms of the actual...
Are you wanting to give all of them
No, absolutely not. I think there absolutely are people who get into the country who shouldn't be here. But the vast majority of them are here because they fear for their lives. The main rhetoric that's on the right is that they need to wait their turn, but that's not the case because... For the most part, it's a long and arduous process, an expensive process for many immigrants to try to get citizenship in the United States, which many cannot afford, many could not wait for, because for the most part...
It's actually not that expensive at all.
For illegal immigrants, for impoverished immigrants
$20
fleeing their country, it is not only expensive, it is dangerous. It is dangerous.
To become a citizen?
No, to get into the country. To sneak into the country because they can't get here through legal means. It's not a matter of whether they want to or don't want to. It's a matter of whether they can or cannot.
There are dozens of consulates all over Mexico, which they need to what people need to pass to get into the United States.
Yes, and then they need to spend money. They need to spend money, and they need to spend time in order to become a citizen. You understand that?
Or they could literally just like go up to the border, go through, start the process of going into of becoming a citizen.
That's not what they can do.
The other people have done.
What? Do you know how getting citizenship works?
How does it work?
What's the process? What's the process for getting citizenship? Because you seem to think it's just walking up to the border.
If you're asking me, then I think that you know how it works. So I'm just gonna let you explain.
Why are you dodging the question though? I asked you.
I'm gonna be honest. I mean, I'm not exactly familiar with with the process of it, so that's why I'm asking.
The process is expensive. It takes time, and it involves
how expensive.
Not only studying, it involves lots of studying in order to become a citizen. It involves money. It involves luck. It involves a whole lot of luck in order to become a citizen, especially when you're an impoverished. When you're an impoverished member of Latin America, it involves lots of spending. It involves lots of studying. And for the most part, there are significant I'm not going to say it's most of them because I don't know.
We want our people to speak English. We want our people to know about our country.
Are you being directly affected by them not speaking English? Are you? How does that directly affect you? How does that directly affect you when they're speaking Spanish instead of English? How does that directly affect you?
So I work for a pharmaceutical company. I don't do pharmaceuticals. I actually just do grocery work, but it's a pharmaceutical company overall.
Yes.
So I directly speak with people, and I've run into people that barely speak English. You can see where the problem comes in.
Yeah, I agree they should learn English if they live in the United States, but it's a matter of them retaining their own culture.
Whenever I'm dealing with people that can't speak English, there's a big language barrier that whenever I'm trying to communicate with them, I can't officially communicate with them because we don't speak the same language.
PG, they can't...
And if we let more and more people in, especially in the kind of state that I live in...
PG, they can't learn English if you're not giving them the opportunities to learn it. That's where government spending comes in. If you want them to learn Spanish, then you have to spend money to give them the programs to learn it.
They don't. They can.
Yeah, you do. How else are they going to learn Spanish?
Why should the government?
Not Spanish. My bad. English. How else are they going to learn English?
Why should everyone depend on the government to teach them everything?
It's called public schooling, and that's a government-funded program.
But does that mean that we should depend on the government as a whole to teach us every single thing we need to know?
I'm talking about illegal immigrants. I'm not talking about U.S. citizens.
So who's supposed to pay for their schooling? Us?
We currently are, and taxes have not raised dramatically as a result of it. So, yes.
So
That's what taxes go towards, the betterment of the society as a whole. It's not theft, it's going towards programs that should benefit you in some way. And when you're giving that, and when that money is going towards programs to help institute illegal immigrants into the economy, you're benefiting businesses, you're benefiting the economy as a whole, and so far it's been a net gain. I think it changes depending on the rate of illegal immigration that you're having into the country, but I think that at the current rates we're seeing, adjusted for inflation and adjusting for the rates at which they're coming in, it's having a net gain on the economy. That's what we're seeing now.
Okay, so we're going to move on to another question, still with immigration. So the president has suggested that people should be allowed status and citizenship based off of a merit-based system. Now, do you agree with this? Why or why not?
Can I start this time?
Yeah.
All right.
I've started like the past 2 times.
Yeah, you did. So I agree with the premise of a merit-based system. However, I don't agree with how it's being instituted. That's the thing about Trump in general. He says a lot of things that people agree with, but then once he actually gets around to doing them, people don't agree with how he's doing them. It's not a matter of whether it should be done, it's a matter of how it's done. But when it comes to the merit-based system, I think that most people would agree that you can't let anyone into the United States. I think that there should be some sort of screening process, and I think that's something that virtually everyone agrees with. I mean, for the most part, it's been a straw man argument that the left supports open borders, which just isn't the case for the most part. At least you won't find any rational leftist who supports open borders. But a merit-based system is what we pretty much already have, at least for having citizens come here legally. But then you have the issue of people who come here illegally and they don't get through that system. Once they're here in the country and they're here illegally, what President Trump wants is to kick them all out regardless of their merit. He doesn't want a merit-based system for illegal immigrants currently in the country. That's the main difference between the two. Because like I said, we already have a merit-based system for people who come here legally, not illegally. But
it's just not ironed out because the system is so old. That's one reason why it needs to be.
Well, no, it's not that it's so old. It's just that they're coming here illegally, and there's no government over. Obviously, when they're coming here illegally, so there's no testing or any merit-based system that they can do at that point. But what I would support is a merit-based system to apply to illegal immigrants as well, because there are people in the country who have, on an individual basis, there are people in the country who give back more to the economy and who do not commit crime, who do not, who benefit the economy, at least in their net gain, and who are being productive members of society. And those people, there is no rational argument for why they should not be in the country. If they're pulling their weight, and if they're working hard, and if they're trying to achieve the American dream, then why should we kick them out of the country? Because there's no net loss with having them in. I think for the most part, the argument comes down to xenophobia when you're looking at it at that basis. You can go on, PG.
So what did you say was xenophobic about that?
I was talking about the individual basis of immigrants who are benefiting the economy. I'm talking about an individual basis. I'm not talking about overall. I'm not saying it's xenophobic to want illegal immigrants out of the country. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that when you're looking at on an individual basis, on an individual immigrant basis, for illegal immigrants who are benefiting the economy and who you can look at and know that they are working hard and that they have not committed crime and that they are...
Actually, they already have committed a crime.
Yeah, by crossing the border. But if they're not committing crimes that directly if they're not committing crimes that directly damage society, because you can make the argument that they're already committing crime by crossing the border illegally.
Because it's building a precedent that nothing will be done against you for committing a crime.
Well, they have no choice but to commit that crime.
If I steal something from a store, should I be punished?
They're not stealing things from a store. They're running for their lives.
They're stealing places for legal immigrants to
Okay, do you think they should stay in Mexico? And do you think they should stay in Honduras and El Salvador, where gangs pretty much run the entire country? Do you think they should just stay there? Because you're right, it does set a precedent. It does set a precedent that if they come here illegally, then for the most
And
part,
if
we're
there's a
setting for that.
precedent
I
that is
agree that
being
that's
placed, and
precedent being
if that
set.
precedent
So
is
then,
bad,
so then, do you
then
think?
we need to stop that precedent
Okay,
before it becomes
so the
more
only way to
remote.
stop that precedent, PG, is to prevent them from coming into the country in the first place and to kick them all out. Do you think that's what we should do? Do you think we should send every single legal immigrant in the country back to where they were, regardless of how much work they're doing, regardless of what they're doing, because they crossed over the border illegally? Do you think that should happen?
I think the ones that are providing the most benefit to the country.
But that's completely subjective. That is completely subjective. Whether they're providing more or less than someone else is completely subjective. Whether my beliefs on this issue, which have always remained the same.
Just because you're looking at a TV and you see all these people inside of a detention center, and that makes you sad and sad.
I have not brought up the separation issue once. You just brought that up, so don't use that in the argument. Well, we can cover that if you want to. But let's just get through what we're covering first.
No, because that's the only reason that a lot of people we can talk about it. I don't care.
I'm not talking about any moral basis. I have not brought up morality once.
Because this immigration argument is more of an emotion-based system. Okay. Judging your politics off of emotion.
You're phrasing it as though it's a moral system. You're phrasing it as though it's morally right and not so much economically right.
Immigration is a moral argument right now.
Okay,
especially right now.
I'm not making a moral argument. I'm not making a moral argument. You're making a blanket statement.
That's the only
you're talking to me right now. I'm not making a moral argument. I'm making an economic argument. And the economic argument is that when you let illegal immigrants in, for those who have not committed crime and those who have passed merit-based tests, and if you provide them citizenship for those who have already here, that promotes the economy. I'm not talking about morals. We can go into a whole argument about morals. I'm talking about the economy. And the fact is that giving illegal immigrants citizenship and allowing them to work in the United States to achieve the American dream benefits them, and it benefits us, and it benefits the society. That is the economic argument.
But we're still making a $116 billion deficit off.
But that does not create a net loss. You're saying it as though it's a big figure, and it sounds like a big figure. You're right. $160 billion is a lot, but so is the economic value that they give back to the United States. You have to look at costs versus gains.
Economic value in taxes?
Not just in taxes, into the work they're doing for businesses. You're talking about you're saying just taxes as though that's the only thing that they give back to the United States, and that's like saying that any other citizens.
That is the only thing they give back to the United States. It's the only thing anyone gives back to the United States.
Really? So working for a business and working for an employer, it doesn't do anything? You think it's just taxes that run the economy?
They're benefiting that business.
Yeah, but that's not taxes. That's providing labor.
Like, if we were to kick out all 11 million immigrants, the economy would not collapse.
The economy would be in turmoil if we kicked out all 11 million illegal immigrants, because that's a huge loss of labor. Do you have any idea how much labor they're providing for the United States for small businesses? Do you have any idea how many businesses would just crash because their labor force is gone?
Like, to say that the economy would be in turmoil, 11 million people is a lot of people, but it depends on who those people are.
Do you have any idea how many businesses?
Because these people are being paid like the worst money. They're not being paid minimum.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that's right, but that cheap labor is what many businesses thrive on.
That protection.
Okay. I'm not saying it's right, but that cheap labor is what many businesses thrive on. And I agree with pathways of getting them to be paid more, but if we're looking at it as it is right now, they're providing cheap labor. They're providing cheap labor.
There should be a pathway.
What?
Unless they're a citizen.
What? I didn't hear what you just said.
I said if they're illegal, I don't think there should be a pathway given to them unless they become. I think that pathway should include.
Okay, but the facts and statistics do not agree with you on that. You're the one making a moral argument. I'm making an economic argument. You think it's morally wrong.
No, I'm not making a moral argument.
Yes, you are. You said repeatedly that you think it's setting a precedent of letting illegal immigrants in because it's illegal. Just because it's illegal, and you believe that morals should prevent that. And I think that's for the most part the moral argument that is made by the right. I'm making an economic argument. I'm not saying it's right that they're being paid less.
Economic argument because earlier you're talking about. Hang on. I know this looks like it's getting into an argument. I'm just saying. You're not making an entirely economic argument because earlier you were talking about saying, "Oh, should we send them back to Mexico and Honduras where they're being killed?"
Yeah, I asked you a question.
That's not an economic argument. You're literally saying you're basing
now you're nitpicking. Now you're nitpicking because I made that. Okay.
No, it's because that was my entire point. That my point is that the argument that people have is that, oh yeah, well, if we don't have them here, then they're going to go back and they're going to die.
Well, that's one argument. I'm not making an argument entirely. That's not my point at all. I brought that up, but that's not my point.
Basing it off of your own emotion.
Well, I'm not basing anything off my own emotions. I'm looking at the facts and statistics. I'm looking at the facts and statistics and illegal immigrants, giving them citizenship to those who are benefiting the economy and those who have a job in the United States benefits the economy.
They just go back and then just help their own economy, their own country's economy.
Because their countries are run by gangs and ours isn't.
Like what?
Mexico, El Salvador, Honduras, Guatemala. Guatemala is plagued with corruption under President Jimmy Morales. There's no opportunities for them to go there, so they come to the United States where there is opportunities, and they seize those opportunities to benefit themselves and to benefit our economy. This isn't charity. I'm not describing charity. I'm describing a simple give-and-take system in which the illegal immigrants are granted citizenship, and they work hard, and they benefit themselves, and they benefit the economy, and it's a win-win. At least in that scenario. I'm not saying that that's the scenario overall. I'm saying that on an individual basis, if they're giving back more to the economy that they're taking away, then why should we remove them? Why should we remove them?
Because we're spending so much money on them, and...
But I've said, this is my third time saying this. This is my
control.
I think I just disconnected from OBS. Wait, am I back on?
Hang on.
I can hear both of you just fine.
I think my live stream stopped, though.
Weird.
I'm gonna type in the chat.
Good.
Hang on, give it a second.
Yeah. And I might have to be out of here by like 1:15.
Okay.
Are you in Central Time?
East Coast time.
Yeah, he lives... I know him personally.
Oh, okay. Okay,
Alright, it looks like it's fine.
Yeah, it's still working,
Okay, let's move on to the next question then.
Okay, bye.
Okay, so do you think taking precautions, especially in schools such as arming teachers and increased security measures, would decrease school shootings?
Yes.
Go on.
I believe that having protections such as airball stadiums, basketball arenas, hockey arenas, stuff like that, public events that a lot of... I believe that it would be a benefit if we actually had same people and say to put our veterans in there, put them in there, and it's a very weak and stupid argument, but
you're kind of cutting in and out, so it's gonna be kind of hard for me to respond, but go on.
I'll kind of give a TLDR in a minute.
Okay.
I think that putting the same protections that we have in schools, that we have in football stadiums and sports events, and art airports and stuff like that, all others, I think that would be a benefit.
Okay, I can respond?
Yeah.
Okay, so the argument regarding arming teachers in schools is essentially making the schools more intimidating for the students themselves. I think the whole point of schools is to make the students feel comfortable there, and arming the teachers is just going to make students feel like they can't go to them. They're going to make teachers... Wait. I think my live stream just cut out. Guys, my live stream just cut out? Chat?
I mean, not OBS, Discord.
Wait, did you just cut out?
Yeah, well, I ended the call.
Oh, you did?
I left it and came back.
Okay.
Sometimes that works. So do it.
Yeah, I'll do that right now. All right, am I back in?
Yep.
Okay.
I will have to actually correct myself for a second. Like, I'm not saying that we should be arming teachers. I'm saying that more school resource officers and people that are actually trained. I don't think teachers. I mean, arming teacher or letting teachers who actually have guns and stuff like that and who want to participate in it. I think that would be something that would actually be a benefit, but forcing teachers to do it is sort of a bad idea. Like, I mean, it should be more of a volunteer system. Like, you know, saying, okay, well, this teacher is going to go ahead and, like, be trained to carry a gun and stuff like that. Because, I mean, teachers are educators. I don't think they should be expected to protect it. But I think they should also at least know the benefits of having a gun in the classroom. Because if, you know, hiding in a corner, I mean, we trained for this a lot in school, hiding in a corner and waiting for the kid to just come in, because there's nothing stopping him from shooting that door handle and then just walking right into his classroom. There's nothing stopping him from doing that.
Can I
stuff like sorry.
Yeah.
Like stuff like Parkland and stuff like that, you know, I mean, none of the teachers had guns, and the only guy that had a gun was too much of a coward to go inside of the school. So that's the end of our... Okay, you can go on.
So, my beliefs regarding gun control have remained the same for the most part. I believe there's two different solutions to two different problems regarding gun control. One regarding mass shootings like the ones in Parkland and the ones in Texas that we saw, and in Nevada as well. I think that's a separate solution for that, and then there's a separate solution for the everyday gun violence we're seeing in places like Chicago and Detroit, where it's a completely different issue and it's a completely different solution, at least in my opinion. If we're talking about the mass shootings, I believe that gun control is necessary, and I believe that most of the measures have been taken so far, and I believe they've already been highlighted en masse. But I think for the most part, the issue regarding mass shootings is mental health. Mental health is something that I think people should focus more on compared to gun control itself, because the Parkland shooter had definitive mental issues. He had many warning signs, and yet he had never been on any medication. He had never seen anyone professional, and he was able to... I think that's, for the most part, the reason why he was able to commit the mass shooting in the first place. And what you're proposing when it comes to arming the teachers, you're treating the symptom and not the illness. That's what you're doing. Treating the illness would be to go right to mental health. And mental health is a complicated and a jumbled mess in terms of American healthcare, if you ask me. And there's so much stigma around it as well, which for the most part I think is why there's not been significant progress on mental health in the United States. But I think our attention should be there, because if we solve the mental health issue, which I don't think it'll ever be solved per se, but I think it could be mitigated, because I think there's a huge issue of mental health amongst teenagers in this generation especially. If we focus our attention there and rather on arming the teachers, which doesn't solve the problem, you're still going to have people who are going to shoot up the schools, and you're probably going to... And yes, you're right, arming the teachers would most likely stop it, but will they kill people? Yes. Is there going to be instances where the teachers cannot get to the students before they commit murder? Absolutely. So it's not a foolproof system, and it's not efficient either, because you're creating an environment in which the students should feel scared, and you're creating an environment where students who have mental health problems don't feel comfortable enough to go to their teachers because they feel as though it's a threatening environment. That's not efficient, and that's not a solution by any stretch of the imagination. A solution would be pouring money into mental health programs in order to help benefit students who are suffering from depression, suffering from anxiety, in order to prevent it from happening in the first place. Not arming the teachers. That's not going to solve anything in terms of the mass shootings occurring in the first place.
So I would say again, like, I'm not saying that like all teachers should be armed. I'm saying that it's a volunteer-based system. A volunteer-based system would basically be saying, like, I mean, teachers, who personally have a gun, they can go ahead and sign up for that program and say, hey, like, I have a gun. I can go ahead and you don't have to teach me anything. I've already taken the classes, everything. They can.
Okay, but you're creating an environment for students where they feel threatened, where they feel their teachers are armed. Their teachers are armed with weapons.
That's why, it wouldn't be saying, okay. I mean, you could have a sign maybe outside saying, our teachers are armed, blah blah blah. But it wouldn't be public knowledge.
But you wouldn't be solving the issue. You wouldn't be solving the issue. You'd just be solving the symptom, or not even solving the symptoms. You'd be.
That's why you need to hit both of them. You need to solve the symptom.
But for the most part, it's one or the other. You can't pour money into both, and I think that's a waste of time.
Yeah, actually, you can. You take cough medicine to relieve your cough. You're treating the symptom and the illness.
Okay, but there's a definitive way to cure the illness, and not a definitive way to cure the symptoms. Which will you take?
You can't exactly always cure the illness because the illness is always going to be prevalent.
It's always going to be prevalent, but you can take measures to prevent it from happening in the first place. Whereas arming the teachers is not preventing it from happening in the first place.
I'm saying, so you can prevent 19 people from dying by not having a coward in your SRO
But you're not preventing
team.
19 people from dying. They're still going to die. You're just going to have defense mechanisms in place.
The amount of people that actually die, though.
But would you rather prevent it from happening in the first place rather than having less people die? Would you rather have no people die?
How are you going to prevent no people from dying?
Mental health and preventing them from having the mindset that they want to kill their students and kill their classmates to begin with.
People are still going to have that mindset.
Not if you put your attention on mental health. Not if you analyze. Not if you are able to pick out people who have clear issues, like this kid, Nicholas Cruz. Both his parents died. Both his parents died. He had significant issues in school. And he had access to weapons. The warning signs were abundantly clear. He commented on YouTube saying he'd be the next school shooter. It was abundantly clear, and yet he did it anyways. He did it anyways, and he was able to slip past the police. He was able to slip past
because everyone was being stupid. Because his caretakers were not paying attention to him.
Yes, so we need to ensure that doesn't happen again.
Broward Sheriff's Office was not paying attention to him whenever they got 49 calls to his living place. They knew that his parents had guns. They knew he had access to guns. They didn't take any action against him.
Do you agree that students would feel threatened and intimidated knowing that their teachers owned weapons?
It depends on who you ask. Personally, I wouldn't feel threatened if I knew some teachers had guns because they're not going to use it on me unless the teacher is going to go mentally insane, go grab someone else's gun, and then start shooting up the school.
Yeah, that's the other aspect of it as well. That could be
the teacher has never.
Yeah, you're making a weapon. You're leaving weapons in a school, and accidents will occur, and that's the other aspect of it as well. That it's not foolproof, and that it's dangerous to have weapons in a school.
That are literally doing the same thing.
What was that? You cut out. Could you say what you said again?
I said that we've already had those things, and it's already worked out very well.
What has worked out very well?
For Parkland.
What?
I'm saying that we already have SROs in our schools, but we just need more of a.
But that's not going to prevent a school shooting. That's going to necessarily mitigate the negative effects of a school shooting. But if a school shooting were to occur, people would die. People would die, and you're not preventing the deaths from occurring.
Of course they're going to die because someone's walking into a school and shooting them up.
So that's why I'd rather pour money into mental health rather than arming the teachers.
We could spend $100 billion on mental health, and it's still going to happen. You can pour money, like pouring money into something is not going to make it.
First of all, it's not just
because you want your burger to taste better doesn't mean putting more spices on it.
Before we move on to the next topic, let me just address that because that's completely. It's not necessarily about the money that you're pouring in. It's about how you're doing it and what the money is going towards specifically. Because you can't just pour money into mental health, period. There's various institutions. There's therapy. There's multiple different kinds of therapy that you can pour it into. There's multiple different kinds of hospitalization programs that you can pour it into. And more importantly, it's how we address mental health to begin with. Because right now, the mental health solution for many therapists and many psychiatrists throughout the United States is that everyone has the same issues and it's the same solution for everyone, which is not the case. It's different for every single individual because it's mental health and it differs wildly. It differs wildly, and I think that's something that we need to address. And it's not just about it's not about pouring more money in. It's not about pouring more money in. It's about changing the way we see mental health and how we address it.
So pouring money. Okay, I didn't mean to say that.
Well, you brought up $100 billion. And
what my point was on that is saying pouring more money into something is not going to solve it.
I agree with you. This is not necessarily
Just like pouring more money into
Iraq
Iraq didn't solve the insurgency problem.
And as I just said,
more and more troops over there.
Yeah, and as I just said, this isn't necessarily a
Actually,
more funding or not or less
that's
funding
another
issue.
argument.
This is how you go about it to begin with, or what you're using the money to do in the first place.
Okay, guys. So last question, still on gun control. I have like 10 minutes left.
Okay. I'm gonna see about who else can moderate the debate while you ask it. Go ahead.
I can probably find someone if you want.
Okay. Could you do that right now?
Yeah, I can
Okay.
do that.
Okay.
So, would an assault weapons ban decrease not just school shootings, but shootings in cities like Chicago and places like that?
No.
Okay. You have to go off that.
I believe that doing an assault weapons ban would be stupid because, for one, you're punishing legal gun owners, and if you're doing an assault weapons ban on, say, the big and scary AR-15, what's going to happen to the people who already have that weapon? What are you going to do with that? That's one question. Another question is, if I mean, not just school shootings, but you brought up places like Chicago, like, people are still going to get those guns. Criminals are not going to listen to laws. That's why they shoot each other. That's another thing. And if it quells school shootings, like, I highly doubt that's going to be the case because, school shootings are still going to happen. They're just going to be using different weapons. There's been times where, Virginia Tech, for an example, he didn't use an AR-15. He didn't use an assault weapon. He used two pistols. He used the Glock, and he used, I believe it was a Beretta. He used two pistols for that shooting, and he killed 20 people. So, banning assault weapons is not going to solve that school shooting problem because, people are still going to go get their mom's Glock or their dad's Glock and go into their school and start shooting people. It's not going to solve anything.
5 minutes.
Okay, so
You can take it.
I've never believed that gun control and preventing legal gun owners from getting guns is the one solution to solving the mass shooting crisis or the everyday gang violence we're seeing on a regular basis. I've never believed that, but I do believe that weapons that are designed to cause more damage, like the AR-15, and designed to cause more death and more destruction, should not be available for children and people under 21 years old to purchase. And for the most part, that's been implemented after the Parkland shooting. I wish it had been implemented before, because I think that was blatantly obvious, but now it is implemented. All right. Okay. All right. So as I was saying, for the gang violence. All right, we're already reconnecting.
Yep, you're back.
All right, perfect. So for the gang violence around Chicago and in Detroit, I think for the most part that is, you're right, it's Glocks and small weapons like that, and there are instances where it can cause even more damage than heavy assault weapons. But as for I said this before, there's entirely different solutions for gang violence, and there's entirely different solutions for mass shootings. For gang violence, I believe it's mostly an issue of corruption on a low level. Especially in Detroit. I think that's a big issue. I think that if we were to address that, we would see a net decrease in
low level. What are you saying by that?
Like low-level county officials, because I think that's a big issue amongst police especially. I think there needs to be a reorganization of police and local government, especially in Detroit and in Chicago and wherever there's areas where there's heavy gang violence, because I think the main cause for that as well is lack of initiative and lack of just trying in general by the local government officials. And I think that's something that we're seeing in general just overall in places where there's heavy gang violence. But for the most part, But for the most part, I do see eye to eye to you to some degree. I don't believe that gun control is the end-all solution when it comes to
any sort of gun control. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say, like, we need, like, actually, allowing legal ownership of, like, any kinds of guns that are not, like, a threat to national would be a benefit, because, these guns, it's very rare that these guns are even used in school shootings. The only ones that they try to make is guns like the AR-15.
Yeah, for the AR-15, I think there should be restrictions. On assault rifles in general, I think there should be heavy restrictions on, especially for...
it's not even about the gun, it's about the type of bullet that it's using. The AR-15 uses a 223 and a 5.56, which, the 223 is also used in hunting rifles.
But we can...
So
we can move on to the next topic. I don't think there's a whole lot for us to discuss here, because I don't think we disagree on a whole lot here.
Probably not.
Yeah. Cole, you can move on to the next one if you're still there. Is Cole still there?
I don't know.
Yeah, I'm still here. I'll give you my last question, then I have to go.
All right. PG, did you find anyone?
Not yet.
All right.
Okay. So, do you think implementing laws like they do in Australia would increase the situation here, considering they haven't had a mass shooting?
Do you want me to respond to that? Yeah, I guess I'll respond to that first.
You can go ahead.
What Australia did was just a giant buyback program in which they just seized most guns. And I don't believe that is a solution in the United States, at least. I don't know about gun control. I don't know about gun ownership in Australia. I have to look at that. But I know for a fact that you'd never ever be able to do that in the United States. Nor do I think you should, because I do believe in an active militia in the United States. I am in favor of the Second Amendment for the most part. But I don't believe in what Australia is doing in terms of gun control, because I believe it is an extreme measure. Because I do believe that you can commit violence in other ways, knives, cars as well. But as for the United States, I think that we're already actively taking the measures to prevent gun violence, and I think that for the most part they've been taken. We've seen that in Florida. They've passed multiple bills that I'm for the most part satisfied with to address the gun control issue. But as I said before, this comes back to the same issue. The one issue that we're not addressing as much as we should be is mental health. Because when it comes down to it, for the most part, I think there are instances where it isn't the case. But I believe that mental health is the issue that we need to look at when analyzing America's mass shooting incidents. I think it's the issue.
I don't know, because I don't know. In my own opinion, I believe that anything that goes against the Second Amendment, which there can be an argument for what goes against the Second Amendment, but any ban on guns, honestly, would probably be ruled unconstitutional, because, especially with this current Supreme Court that we have. Because I'm not saying it's because they're more conservative. I'm saying because most, especially the newer judges, and if Brett Kavanaugh gets accepted into it, they're more constitutionalists and they actually go off the Constitution. So,
but what we're getting with the Republicans, and the conservative-controlled Supreme Court is that we're not addressing the mental health, which the Democrats aren't really addressing either, and I've taken issue with that very much. But with the conservatives in the Supreme Court, you're definitely won't be addressing mental health. That's not something that the conservatives even consider an issue when it comes to, at least the leadership. I'm not making a blanket statement, but for the leadership, they haven't addressed that at all. Democrats have, but not as much as I would like. And for the conservative Supreme Court, they're going to deregulate, especially when it comes to gun laws. And like I said before, I don't think that gun control is the end-all solution, but I think it's going to make it worse if you undo the legislation that's been occurring throughout the past year in light of the Parkland shooting and Sutherland Springs shooting and the Las Vegas shooting, because legislation has been passed. Things have been done in response to those. And I think for the most part, in terms of gun control, I've been mostly satisfied. In terms of mental health, I've been very disappointed. But as for the Supreme Court, I would agree that they would take measures to deregulate what's been done to prevent mass shootings.
I can't exactly disagree. I mean, mental health is something that's honestly ignored, and I know several people that are being affected by mental health.
Yeah, I think that everyone at this point knows someone who's being affected by mental health. It's an epidemic. It really is, especially in this generation.
But I mean, I think, like, I mean, it's these school shootings and these shootings and stuff like that. They make it look like it's happening all the time whenever it's a very, 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 very rare occurrence.
Well, that's not true because there's been over 100. Don't quote me on that, but I believe there's been over 100 mass shootings in the United States compared to where there's been single-digit mass shootings in most other countries. So
and it depends on what you identify as a school shooting.
Not a school shooting, a mass shooting. A mass shooting.
Well, okay, mass shooting.
Yeah.
So it kind of depends on how you identify that, because I mean, I saw a CNN report that literally said there's been one mass shooting like every week since 2018 started, and I mean, I looked at it and they literally counted a BB gun being shot at a student in a middle school in New York as a mass shooting.
Well, regardless, yeah, I think for the most part,
most of that, like, I mean, it's probably a lie of how they're identifying a mass shooting. In any case, there's probably been only maybe a dozen.
I don't really disagree with you, and I think we should probably move on to a different topic because I don't really necessarily strongly disagree with you.
I actually really don't have I don't have any mods that I can actually like introduce yet.
I can try to find some.
Really responding to me. Because I'm trying to find a non-biased person. I almost got one of my friends in here, but he probably would be really biased, and he'd start like screaming your head off. Because that's what he said to me.
But Cole, are you still on?
Huh?
Did Cole leave?
Yeah, he left right after he asked that question.
All right. How about we pause? How about we pause the live stream just until we can get someone else?
I mean, you can't really pause the live stream. You would just have to end the live stream.
Yeah. This is my first time doing this. I have no idea.
Yeah, you can't pause it.
All right. I do want to go back to socialism though, because I think we kind of wasted our 30 minutes on socialism talking about World War II.
We can go back to that. We can probably just revisit some of the topics until we can find someone.
Because it's a big topic. It's something I wanted to discuss heavily, and we really wasted on World War II.
In my own opinion, like, World War II has a pivotal role in how the Great Depression ended. But that's why I started bringing it up, because my point was that Nazi Germany had a very, very quick recovery after Hitler got in, because the economic policies that he was introducing.
But the Depression ended before World War II.
What?
The Depression ended before World War II.
And how do you think that?
Because World War II began on 1939, and the Great Depression ended in 1938.
In the United States or as a whole?
I'm going to check it right now. I know I said no looking up, but this is something that's just factual data that...
I don't care if you look something up. That's what
I kind of do, because it's... Though I think we should rely mostly on our peripheral knowledge for this debate, but this is just like factual data that shouldn't really be disagreed on for the most part. Yeah, there's no start and end. There's no really start and ending point, but I wouldn't say, for the United States at least, I would not say that I think the World War II absolutely caused us to become more powerful. Oh wait, Max just asked a question. How much of what I earn belongs to you and why? That's not necessarily how that's like the whole can of worms I don't want to get into. But with World War II, I think that the war absolutely benefited the United States economically, but I don't think it's the cause for the end of the Great Depression. I think for the most part, and this has been agreed for the most part by most economists and historians that the programs...
Because, I mean, I'm looking at stuff right now that... Sorry for interrupting you, but
yeah, that's fine.
I'm looking at stuff right now that there was a sort of recovery between 1933 and 1937, and around 1938, the whole thing just came crashing down again.
I'm going to pull up...
That's kind of like a...
What are you looking at? Economic growth, GDP growth, job growth?
Industrial production in the United States.
Oh, okay, that's... Yeah, that's not the same as economic growth.
And... Where is it?
I'm looking at GDP growth right now. After FDR took office, there's a very...
GDP growth was going up, and I mean, I'm looking at the same things.
Yeah.
So, in 1929, it started to shoot back down. Same thing happens in 1933.
Okay, once you look at unemployment rates... Once you look at unemployment rates, after FDR took office, unemployment plummeted, GDP recovered. That's
same exact thing happened.
The stream is reconnecting, and I can hear you fine now.
Yeah, it's probably like because of so much internet connection being sucked up by your live stream.
Yeah.
That's probably why.
I'm fine now. You can say what you said before.
So what I'm saying is that like the same thing happens in every single data chart that you're looking at. Unemployment, GDP growth. All of this similar graphing is the same thing that you see right whenever 1938 hits. Because there's just this sudden crash of everything. God, I can hear myself.
The Depression ended. The Depression ended around 1938 and 1939, it didn't start in 1939.
No, it started in 1929.
Yes.
And around 1940.
Yeah. I mean, people can disagree whether or not the Depression continued up until that point. I think there was recovery initially around that point, but it was still dismally poor. But it wasn't.
There was no true recovery until World War II was started, especially when the United States got involved.
FDR recovered the economy. That's just a fact. Whether it's GDP growth, whether it's job growth, whether it's industrial growth, FDR's principles and progressive economic principles brought the United States out of the Depression and led us into World War II. And I think that World War II absolutely made the United States better as an economic power, but it wasn't recovery, that was just further economic growth. And Max just asked a great question in the chat. Didn't the Soviet Union show that socialism can't work? I can respond. Do you want me to respond to that first, or do you want to respond to it?
No, you can go ahead.
Okay. So I said this before earlier in the debate. Socialism is a huge umbrella term. That means pretty much anything from the USSR, China, North Korea, and Canada, which are all governments and economic institutions that differ wildly from each other. And the form of socialism which I advocate for is social democracy, which is basically just a capitalist system. Like social democracy, if implemented, is just basically a capitalist system with socialist or early Marxist principles in place to help regulate the economy. I think Keynesian economics plays a big role there as well. But the USSR was Marxist. It was anarcho-Marxist, which was a principle in which you make everyone have equal wealth, equal opportunity, and that's not what I advocate for, and that's not what I think many American progressives and social democrats advocate for either. In fact, many social democrats and democratic socialists around the time of the Cold War were some of the most vocal protesters to the USSR. So that's my answer to that.
Let me go ahead and reread that question. I believe that the socialism that we look at today, Canada and Scandinavia and stuff like that, it's not like you can say that it's a different kind of thing, but it's not socialism. It's not socialism.
Well, depends what your definition of socialism is. What's your definition of socialism?
Total government control.
Okay, but that's not the definition of socialism that many people use. So it gets very confusing when you're using socialism interchangeably with communism, which is what you just described. Total government control of the economy is communism. And socialism and communism are not the same thing by any stretch of the imagination. To say so would be just completely and totally factually incorrect.
Okay. What the definition of socialism is telling me. It's a range of economic and social systems characterized by social ownership and workers' self-management of the means of production.
Yeah, that's the Google definition. That's the Google definition, but people aren't using it colloquially. That's the term, right? That's how you pronounce that? Whatever. People are not using that term to describe it to describe that. People have stretched the definition to its limits, to the point where that's not even the definition to describe democratic socialism or social democracy. Do you understand what I mean?
So do you advocate for socialism, or do you advocate for democratic socialism?
Again, there's a what is socialism to you? Is socialism basically the same as communism to you? Because I don't advocate for communism.
I believe that there's not that much of a difference between socialism and communism.
But socialism is a bunch of different. Communism is underneath socialism. Do you understand that? Like it's a giant umbrella term that encompasses communism, encompasses democratic socialism.
Yes, it's an umbrella term, but it's been used in the same exact sense.
Yeah, and I don't.
That have tried to use it in its entirety.
But the term that I'm using it in, which is how it should be used, at least at this current state in economics and politics, is an umbrella term encompassing many different political ideologies advocating for some degree of government involvement. To me, socialism is just a general term stating government involvement, which is so vague and shouldn't even be used.
Countries that have actually used socialism in the sense that Karl Marx originally wanted,
which is
all of those countries have collapsed.
What do you mean? Every single country has collapsed? Yes,
all of the countries that have used Karl Marx's socialism has collapsed.
Yeah, and Karl Marx's socialism is the ideology that socialism will inevitably lead to communism, which is not the ideology that I follow.
But there wouldn't be no socialism without Karl Marx. That's
correct.
Karl Marx is the one who originally created
and then people took his writings and then made it varied and produced many different and widely varying
countries such as FDR. FDR didn't use socialism as an idea.
No, he used progressivism. And honestly, social democracy and progressivism are interchangeable.
Make the United States social.
What? You're kind of.
I think. What?
You're kind of cutting out. Just go on.
Earlier, you're talking about the United States being more socialist because of programs such as Social Security.
No, that's not what I said.
Medicare, Medicaid.
That is not what I said. That's not what I said.
I thought you did. I'm not gonna accuse you of saying all this stuff. So what I'm saying is that
that's not what I believe, at least.
But socialism. What my point is that socialism is still a failure. All the times that it's been used in all of the countries. Venezuela,
it was used right here in the United States, and our economy boomed because of it.
Not North Korea.
And also,
China,
Venezuela. I'm very glad you brought up Venezuela. Let me talk about Venezuela for a second. People cite Venezuela as a failure of democratic socialism and social democracy, but in reality, that's not the case.
Democratic socialism.
What?
Just socialism.
But again, I'm not going to use socialism as a very specific term, which is what you're using it as, and it makes it very confusing. I'm using the specific ideology that Nicolas Maduro and Hugo Chavez used in Venezuela was democratic socialism. But
it was more of a dictatorship. It was more similar.
Yeah, it's a dictatorship using democratic socialism.
What?
But Venezuela isn't failing because of democratic socialism. It's failing because it's led by corrupt and vicious leaders who are just doing whatever they can for personal gain. That's not a failure of democratic socialism. That's a failure of corrupt leadership.
I'm just trying to process how you think that Venezuela is democratically socialist.
Well, democratic socialism by definition is...
They've always been a command economy.
Yeah, but democratic socialism also advocates for a command economy.
And that's the problem with any kind of socialist policy, like from Marxist-Leninism to democratic socialism.
Let me explain.
Any sort of command economy.
You're very confused about what socialism really is, but I'll explain to you what my personal beliefs in social democracy are and progressivism are. I believe that
that is also the problem.
What?
That is the problem, that no one can agree on what's democratic socialism.
I agree. I completely agree. I'm not describing democratic socialism, though.
When no one can agree on that,
I'm not describing democratic socialism. I'm describing social democracy and progressivism as a whole. Progressivism in general advocates for Keynesian economic theory, which is something that I'm very much in favor for, and something I very much believe has been a success. Keynesian economic theory advocates for a small wage and income gap between the rich and the wealthy, and that's not a moral argument. That is an economic argument because, as I was saying to start off the video, when you have money, and you haven't addressed Keynesian economics at all, which is the main tenet of social democracy as an economic system. When you have money all towards the top, rather than money flowing evenly through the economy, especially towards the middle class, you will have economic stagnation and inflation because that money is not flowing because the rich do not spend as rapidly per capita as the middle class does. That's what Keynesian economic theory boils down to.
They spend way more money than anyone else because they actually have money.
Not as rapidly, not per capita. I said...
So
in general, yes, obviously they spend more, but not per capita. Not per capita. And that's what matters when it comes to...
Is it a bad thing that people are making money?
What?
Is it a bad thing that people make money?
I never said that. What? Okay,
Why,
now you're putting words in my mouth. All I said was
no.
Wait, if you...
No, you brought up a point that I completely forgot about, and you just brought it up.
Okay, what is your point then?
A lot of the things that you see right now with a lot of people is they say like the rich are the worst people in the world.
I don't agree.
Top 1%, top like 0.1%.
Yeah, I don't agree with that rhetoric.
1%. Like no, that's a huge point about democratic socialism and progressive.
No, that's a huge point of Bernie Sanders' rhetoric. That's not a big point of social democracy.
What?
That's a big point of Bernie Sanders' rhetoric on politics, not a big point on social democracy as a whole.
Bernie Sanders.
What?
That's people like...
That is Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders is who popularized the whole top 1% argument.
But now half of the Democratic Party is starting to spout that kind of rhetoric.
Yeah, and I don't agree with it because I think it's not only fear-mongering...
Andrew Gillum.
Okay.
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Okay, but you're not speaking to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. You're speaking to me. You're speaking to me, and I don't agree with that rhetoric. So I don't know why you're arguing with me about it, because I don't agree with it and I don't defend it. I don't agree with the rhetoric because it's fear-mongering for the most part, and it's not solving the actual issue.
No, because you call yourself a progressive. That's why I'm saying that.
Okay, but I'm describing
that ideology as a whole in progressivism. Because if you say that you're a progressive, you're most likely identifying with the current day progressives of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
I am. I'm identifying with their ideology. I'm not identifying with their rhetoric. It's two different things.
But if you identify with their ideology, then you're protecting that specific thing that they want.
I am really not. Okay, my views are my own. My views are not Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's or Bernie Sanders. My views are my own, and my views are that I don't believe that the rhetoric that they're using is...
But the only candidates and people that are actually spouting the same rhetoric that you want, and the only choice that you probably have...
But you're generalizing me into Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
It's the only thing that you can do right now.
You're not arguing with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez or Bernie Sanders, you're arguing with me. And let me tell you what I personally believe when it comes to that. I don't believe in fear-mongering about the top 1%. I believe in closing the tax loopholes such as tax havens and shell companies in order to promote the economy, because those loopholes that the rich are using damage the economy and damage us in the long term. I believe that once those loopholes are closed, we can look at, on an individual basis, whether or not we should raise or lower the taxes on the rich. Because once those loopholes are closed, you will have a completely different way of going about it. Because for the most part, I think the rich get away with a lot because of those loopholes. They're able to get away with the...
get away with what?
Get away with getting through the taxes, which are high on them, and they're able to get through because of those loopholes. And once those loopholes are...
So...
Go
would
on.
Taxing them even higher solve that problem?
Did you hear what I said? I said that once you close the tax loopholes that they're using to get around the taxation...
Tax loopholes are completely irrelevant whenever you're
How is it irrelevant
taxed?
to the discussion of democratic socialism or social democracy? Because that's the
You're
main tenet of
obviously
them.
going to be looking for different ways to try to avoid your taxes whenever half of your income is being taken away by the government. That's what taxation is. It's putting a gun to your head and saying, give me your
Now
money.
you're making the Ben Shapiro argument regarding taxation, which is completely and utterly delusional. Taxation by nature should benefit you in the end. That's money that's going towards your society. That's money that's going towards your town. That's money that's paving your road. That's money that's going towards your institutions. That's money that's in the end should go back in your pocket. It's not theft, which is what Ben Shapiro and what you're and the argument that you're making now.
Do you disagree that taxation is theft?
I completely disagree with taxation is theft because that money in the end is being spent on services for you.
It's because you don't. It is basically. I'm not trying to act like Ben Shapiro. I mean, Ben Shapiro makes some good arguments, but
I think he's the most intelligent speaker I've ever heard. I greatly admire Ben Shapiro.
But at the same time, whenever you don't have a choice to pay your taxes or not, then that's whenever the theft part comes in. Because, okay,
I understand. We're really veering away from the topic at this point. Let's go back to tax loopholes because that's really where we were before. You said that tax loopholes are irrelevant in this argument, which I completely disagree with because you can't have a discussion
it's
about...
because that's more socialist policy that...
Okay.
It goes into taxes because... Like a lot of socialist policies advocate for higher taxes on the rich, sometimes even the middle class, stuff like that. Because I mean,
okay, now you're generalizing now. I'm trying to be specific. I'm trying to be specific and not generalize. I'm talking about specifically tax loopholes. So can we stay on that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. As I was saying, you cannot have a rational discussion regarding whether or not you should tax the rich higher or less until you close the tax loopholes, because the tax rate is for the most part irrelevant because that's not actually what they're paying. They're getting out of that because of those tax loopholes, and until you close them, until you close off the tax havens, until you close off the shell companies, and until you close off the various amount of tax breaks that they can use to their advantage if they're a big company, then you cannot talk about raising or lowering the taxes. Because the reality is that people don't know whether or not the tax should be raised or lowered because the loopholes are a completely different variable that changes everything regarding the tax system. And that's not being acknowledged at all, whether it's Bernie Sanders who doesn't acknowledge it, and whether it's... Well, he does acknowledge it, but he does not acknowledge it when he's talking about taxing the 1%. And once you take that into consideration, you really can't advocate for whether or not you want to raise or lower the taxes because there's an entirely different variable that's not being taken into consideration. Do you disagree?
I'm kind of mixed. Okay.
Because I agree that the rich are taxed a lot, but the amount of loopholes that they use in general for their businesses, for the most part, allow them to get out of that high taxation. That's not looked at all. That's not looked at all by the right deliberately in order to make it look like the rich are paying their fair share. And it's...
Do you think a flat tax would work?
I am in favor of a progressive tax.
And what would a progressive tax look like?
I think it depends based on the state of the economy and on the state of inflation. And I think as I said before, you have to remove those loopholes in order to have a conversation at all about a progressive tax.
Okay, I'm asking percentages. What would a progressive tax look like?
In terms of what? In terms of the rich, in terms of the middle class, or in terms of the...
All of them.
Well, there's different rates applying to each tax bracket depending on which one you're talking about, so you can't ask me to give a tax rate for all of them.
In the ones that we have right now. The ones that were instituted under the Tax Cut and Jobs Act.
Okay. So as long as we're talking about the tax
we only have, I think we have about 3 tax brackets now.
Yeah, that's what the tax bill did. It limited it to 3 tax brackets. And what we're seeing with the tax bill right now is we're seeing small benefits for the middle class, and that's mostly a result of the giant amounts of deficit that's being created as a result of the bill. And we're seeing the rich win more than any other group whatsoever. I mean, you can make the argument that the middle class is benefiting from the tax bill currently, but the rich are benefiting far more, and in the end, that's widening the income gap. Even if the middle class is benefiting, which they won't be in a few years because statistics show that the tax bill will in the end negatively affect them. It's already negatively affecting people in suburban areas like where I live on Long Island. People are being heavily affected by the tax bill because it raises their taxes there on real estate. And
see that whole like you said something in the middle of that. It's the what did you say? Like the not wage gap. It's a
income gap.
Income gap. Like the argument is so overused that.
Well, I kind of use it interchangeably. I'm more so meant the wealth gap. I'm more so meant the wealth gap.
Of course, there's going to be an income gap.
Let me rephrase myself then. Let me rephrase myself. The wealth gap. The gap between how much the wealth.
Of course, there's going to be a wealth gap.
Yeah, there's going to be a wealth gap. Obviously, there's going to be a wealth gap. You can't have everyone make the same amount of money. That'd be insane. But if you're
Would that wait? Hang on. Would that be a good thing if everyone made the same amount of money?
It absolutely would not be a good thing. You're eliminating the initiative for people to work if everyone's making the same amount of money.
Exactly.
Okay. You're just that's a communist principle, and that's something that I vehemently disagree with. So that just goes hand in hand with the fact that socialism and communism don't mean the same thing.
A lot of people that like literally for like a closer income gap and stuff like that. Those are usually the people that say, well, we should make the same amount of money. We need to do this. We need to do that. Like stuff like that is completely. It's a completely bad idea to even argue about the income gap because obviously I'm probably the place I'm working at. I'm probably making more money than 30,000 other people. Like, of course, because what I'm being paid at, it's not that much, but of course, I'm making more money than a lot of other people. There's an income gap right there. There's people that work at McDonald's that are making more money than anyone else. That's an income gap.
When it comes to the wealth gap, I'm not just talking about I'm not just talking about the income gap. I'm talking about the wealth gap because I think that's for the most part.
Okay, wealth gap.
Okay,
but it kind of goes hand in hand because again, there's still a wealth gap with people who are making.
Yeah, there's going to be a gap. There's obviously going to be a gap. You can't have the rich having the same amount of money as the.
But why should that be a bad thing that there's people who are making millions and millions of dollars?
It's not a bad thing. The existence of a gap is not a bad thing. Let me explain myself. The existence of a gap to begin with is not a bad thing. However, the existence of a large gap is a bad thing because that eliminates economic improvement and that eliminates economic progress.
Actually, it doesn't.
It does.
Because there's none like.
Look at Reaganomics. Look at Reaganomics. Reaganomics did great things for the American economy while Reagan was in office, and then once George H.W. Bush took office, those same economic principles were maintained and kept for a long period of time, and we saw stagnation and inflation. That's what it was called.
Because their economic philosophy and values were completely different.
No,
H.W. and Reagan were pretty different people.
Their economic policies were virtually the same.
It wouldn't be the same if...
It's the same economic policies that they're both implementing. What?
I said their policies wouldn't have been the same if there was a difference. There was a difference because, one of the reasons he lost his re-elected is because
the economy was in a decline and then Bill Clinton saved it.
He started increasing taxes. He completely went against one of the promises that he made on the campaign trail.
I'm not talking about no new taxes. I'm talking about the wage gap or the income. I'm sorry, I'm using the terms interchangeably, and I really shouldn't. I'm just going to say the wealth gap because that's really encompasses all of them together. Do you agree?
Wait, what?
I'm just going to use wealth gap when referring to the gap in general. Just from now on.
That's what I keep saying.
Yeah, me too. Okay, but the wealth gap under Reagan and the wealth gap under H.W. was huge, and it grew especially under H.W. Bush, and that's when we started to see economic stagnation. That's when we started to see that. because when you widen the gap, you will. This is the whole basis of Keynesian economics, which is what I was saying before. And you're saying that the gap has no negative benefit, no negative causes to the economy, and Keynesian economics is basically the opposite of that. The gap is when you have. I've said this repeatedly. I'm going to say it again, I guess. But when you have wealth, all towards the top, when all your capital is at the top in a select group of people, they're not going to spend it as rapidly per capita as the middle class is. When the middle class is strong and that money is being flowed evenly through the middle class, then that's money that's being spent rapidly, quickly on appliances, on computers, on phones, on cars, on food, on businesses. With the wealthy, they're spending large amounts of money, but it's not happening rapidly. It's not happening at a quick pace because they have all the money they need.
But who are the people who own all this money? Like the supposed top 1%. Who are those people?
Are you talking about specific people, or are you talking about in terms of income?
I'm talking about who they are in general. Who are they?
Well, I mean, I believe it's at 50,000 people who are qualified for the top 1%. Maybe it's...
No, I'm talking about what they do.
Well, how's that relevant?
It's because there's a reason they have all that money.
Yeah, there's obviously a reason why they have all that.
If
I'm not disagreeing.
Like, saying that, like,
you're posing the argument that I disagree with people being wealthy, which is not what I believe at all.
No, I'm saying that what your point was is that there's a whole point to say, okay, well, these people don't if all these people had all this money, they're not going to spend it as much as, like,
per capita. They're not going to spend as much per capita.
And stuff like that. That's not true, because
it is true.
They're spending that money.
Per capita,
there's a reason they have all that money.
When you're talking about in terms of per capita,
they keep reinvesting that money.
No, but that's large amounts of money being taken out at once. That's not. I'm talking about in terms of per capita. You're talking about in terms overall. So it becomes confusing. But when you talk about in terms
of the system that we have right now, inflation is still going down. If your point was true, inflation would be going up.
This is an argument regarding inflation. This is an argument regarding
you're talking about
economic growth and GDP.
Like more money going into the economic system and stuff
That's
like that.
That's not what I'm talking about.
That ties right back into inflation.
You clearly missed my entire point regarding Keynesian economics, because that's not what I said at all.
What is Keynesian economics to you?
I've explained it. This is my fourth time explaining it. Keynesian economic theory, which is the basis of the economic theory for democratic socialism and social democracy especially, and the progressive movement overall, boils down to the fact that when you have a lot of capital and a lot of money, I feel like a broken record, and I guess I'm explaining this again, but when you have a lot of capital and a lot of wealth towards the top, towards a select small group of people in terms of the entire population, then that money is not being spent and distributed as evenly as it is per capita, not overall. You're talking about in terms of overall. I'm talking about in terms of per capita, which completely changes everything regarding Keynesian economics. Per capita, the middle class spends more money on appliances and on utilities than the top 1% does.
Are you saying that Keynesian economics is basically democratic socialism, or because I don't think, like, I kind of have a basic understanding of what Keynesian economics is.
I think it's more prominent in social democracy.
Way more capitalistic than socialist.
Keynesian economics, for the most part, is meant to operate within a capitalist system. So yes, it's a social democratic system.
It's not.
Yes, it is. It's the main tenet of social democracy.
Keynesian economics is like strongly. It says it right here that there are various macroeconomic theories about how, in the short run, and especially during recessions, economic output is strongly influenced by aggregate demand.
Yeah, aggregate demand, exactly.
In the economy.
Exactly.
But it has nothing to do with like any sort of socialistic policy.
Well, by nature, Keynesian economics can actually be applied anywhere, but the whole what Keynesian economics advocates for in the end.
Way more Keynesian, but like it's a mistake to even try to say that we were more socialistic whenever most of the stuff was actually literally just being given to us by Keynesian economics.
That's not true. Keynesian economics was utilized by FDR and was somewhat utilized by Obama during the recovery following the 2008 housing crisis. And
So they weren't socialistic, they were just being Keynesian.
but Keynesian economics by nature is a progressive movement.
It's not.
It is.
How?
Because you're advocating for reducing the wage gap or the wealth gap between the middle class and the wealthy class, which is the basis of everything social democratic.
No, again, Keynesian economics is more based off of demand. It's not
Yeah,
doing
aggregate
anything
demand.
to say about it's
No,
it has
not
nothing
demand.
to do with
Not
any
demand.
sort of wage gap.
Not demand. Aggregate demand. Do you know what aggregate demand is? Do you know what aggregate demand is? If you don't know, it's fine.
I'm not exactly like familiar with a lot of this stuff.
Okay,
I'm not
but
an
you're
economics
referring to
expert.
aggregate demand as though it's demand itself, which is not true. Aggregate demand is the total spending overall by individuals.
No, it's not spending, it's demand.
Yeah, aggregate
Total demand for final goods and services in an economy at a given time.
Yes, that is total.
That's aggregate demand.
Yes.
It's not spending.
Okay, but spending and demand goes hand in hand. So the amount of spending you're doing goes hand in hand with the demand there is. In order to create demand in the first place, you need money to be flowing evenly throughout the middle class, which is what Keynesian economics stands for. This was a theory developed during the Great Depression, and it was used by FDR in order to bring the United States out of the Great Depression.
But Keynesian economics weren't even introduced until
1936.
1936.
Yeah. During the Great Depression, exactly.
Yeah, but not in the beginning. That was like 3 years after the peak of the Great Depression.
Okay, but he was still instituting things that lie in Keynesian economics.
Like in 1933.
Yes.
That was 3 years before his book was even
Yeah, it doesn't mean the
released.
principles regarding Keynesian economics didn't exist before. It was just compiled into a book by John Keynes in 1936. It existed in principle before then, just like socialism existed in principle before Karl Marx wrote about it. Okay.
Okay, so this is also what it also says. Because Keynesian economists generally argue that as aggregate demand is volatile and unstable, a market economy will often experience inefficient macroeconomic outcomes in the form of economic recessions when demand is low and inflation
Exactly.
whenever demand becomes high.
Exactly.
These are mitigated by economic policy responses, in particular monetary policy, central bank and fiscal policy, actions by the government, which can help stabilize
Exactly.
output over the business
Actions by the
cycle.
government.
So it's not a progressive.
That is progressive. Or at least it should be.
It's not progressive. That's literally depending on capitalism to solve your problem.
Yeah, and progressivism does lie in capitalism.
Progressivism is not anything near capitalism.
Are you kidding me? Progressivism is a capitalist system. You pit socialism and capitalism as though it's two polar forces when that cannot be further from the truth. It cannot be further from the truth. Progressivism is a capitalist system.
Progressivism is literal. Well, progressivism in the beginning is not even.
And you're right, Keynesian economics is a capitalist-based system. Keynesian economics is meant to operate within a capitalist system, not a communist system, which is why it by nature is progressive, because progressivism is a capitalist-based system.
Progressivism is not an economic system in the first place.
Yeah, you're right. Progressivism is not an economic system. Keynesian economics is. Just like conservatism isn't an economic system to begin with, there's the principles within conservatism that are economic, just like with progressivism. And I consider Keynesian economics to be a main tenet of progressivism in that regard. All right.
Yeah, I mean,
We should probably wrap this up. We're starting to go in circles, and the debate is already like 2 hours longer than we wanted it to be.
Hey, it's almost we're only 5 minutes from being 2 hours.
Yeah, but I think you want to close it. I think we're good. I feel pretty good about.
I kind of wanted to ask one more thing.
All right, you can ask one more thing. Go ahead.
So, do you think free speech should be limited?
It depends.
Do you think someone should be able to say the N-word at any point in time whenever they want?
Whether or not they should or whether or not they legally are allowed to are two different things. Obviously, my morals say no, but they legally are allowed to do that. I mean, and Because I think.
Do you think someone should be able to, for example, like support Hitler, support his ideas, like openly say like?
Okay, I'm just gonna say what I believe in regarding public.
Openly say like Jews are people. Say they are bad people, or tell black people are bad, Mexicans are bad, blah blah blah. Like
it's completely legal.
Do you think people like that should be arrested?
It is completely legal to say whatever you want, however racist, however bigoted, or however horrible it is, as long as it doesn't invoke violence.
Depends on what state you're in, actually. Because I mean, if you go to California, they're probably going to arrest you.
Yeah, I don't think that's true, but.
So that's why I'm asking that. Is
my views regarding free speech is that unless you can directly see that someone's freedom of speech or someone's speech is invoking violence in some way, then there's no reason why it should be limited. Which is very libertarian, actually. I drift away from liberalism in that regard. I believe that people could say whatever the hell they want as long as it doesn't harm another person.
But you could literally say, well, depends on what your definition of harm is.
As long as it doesn't invoke violence, I think when it comes down to it, it's on an individual basis, and you can't really make a blanket statement regarding all freedom of speech. Okay, you're cutting out really bad. I can't hear you. I can't hear you.
I'm cutting out?
Yeah. Are you still there? All right, I think it's time to wrap it up.
And I was going to finish my point.
Okay, go ahead.
And if this does go on for another 5 minutes, like OBS is going to cut out because OBS will cut out every 2 hours during the live stream. So what my point was is that like socialism.
Can we now go back to socialism? We're on freedom of speech. If we start on social media.
Yeah, I know. I was thinking of something else. So what my point was is that you could like whenever you say, well, as long as you're not directly like attacking someone, they get like it always goes up to the person who's like Jewish or black or something like that, because they are obviously like feeling attacked. They feel, okay, well,
are they being harmed?
Feelings.
Are they being harmed?
Against,
unless they're being physically harmed, unless their safety is under threat?
Not physically, they're being verbally harmed.
Okay, well then, who cares?
Mentally harmed.
Mentally harmed. Unless someone's freedom of speech endangers someone's safety, I don't care if they're offended. Like
most of the time, it doesn't.
No one should be jailed for offending someone else.
There are still laws in certain states, in countries that directly say, like, you cannot say this because it'll hurt this person's feelings.
Yeah, I disagree with that. And I think for the most part, you're making a mischaracterization of every other country in terms of their freedom of speech laws. But I do agree with the principle that freedom of speech should be completely free unless it directly harms someone's safety or someone's well-being. Can we leave off on that? Can we leave off on a good note?
You're cutting out again.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. Can we leave off on that? I mean...
Yeah, we can go ahead and leave off on that.
All right, so thank you to everyone who tuned into the debate. I thought it was pretty good. What'd you think? What'd you think?
Yeah, like, I mean, for first like actual debate on my channel, it was actually pretty interesting.
Yeah, I agree. But this was kind of... there was a lot of disorganization. We probably should have managed it better. But for the most part...
I mean that's as good as you're going to do it unless you literally go... like specific questions, stuff like that. That's usually how a debate works. You can't really organize it. They're always going to be disorganized unless you literally want a Lincoln Douglas debate. Which obviously I'm not gonna do a Lincoln Douglas debate. That's just way too
me neither. I agree. But
like
okay. So thank you guys. So thank you everyone for watching. I think my stream pretty much cut out most of the time. So PG, could you send me the video once I...
Well, it's still gonna post, like, I mean, like, if it cuts out and then comes back, it's going to post,
oh, okay.
like, in its entirety.
Okay. Well, if it doesn't, then just send me the video, is what I mean.
That's gonna... Well, yeah.
Okay.
I can probably go.
All right.
through.
I'm gonna close the stream now. Thank you guys, everyone. Thank you for watching, and hopefully we'll do more of this in the future. I did thoroughly enjoy this, and thank you for initiating this to begin with, PG, because you came to me about this.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
I'll make sure to do another meme just in case we want to debate again.
All right.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and leave the call real quick.
Me too.
Or I'll
All right.
mute myself.
See ya.
See ya.